every company I've been at, we've always had a channel focused on customer stories or customer wins. I find that is a simple, easy way to help people live and breathe what's happening with customers. That is one thing I've seen. Another one, especially my last company, is when we were allowed to, we would take videos from these on-site tours. Not every company would allow us to, but if we could, we're like, hey, so we were with our customer today. Here's their actual facility. We're going to walk through. We're going to show where our tool is being used. And we would share that video back with the company or show it at a meeting. And Exonify, I remember Greg once would have a customer come in for our company QBR, and there would be a customer interview on stage in front of the company. And you want the whole company to be customer obsessed and to think from a customer perspective. So, but not everyone's going to be able to do those on-site type activities or be customer facing. So how do we find ways to enable others to live that experience or to share in some of that context? But the easy win I always find is just you have a channel, you empower your teams to share wins and updates and anecdotes from customers there. And some of the companies I've been at, we've actually taken that, and then anytime there's a win, we document it in an Excel sheet, and then it's searchable. So if you're a new sales rep and you're trying to understand stories, you actually have a database that then can be searched with all those things that are being added. They can have, whether they're publicly approved or they're anecdotal and you don't say the name, you have that as a reference point.
Spotlight, the Customer Success Soundtrack, brought to you by CSM Focus. From the heart of Canada, this is your host, Emma Lowe. Good morning, everyone. We're here with Derek Vollebregt, VP of Customer Success from iLobby. Welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. It's nice to be in the other side. As I said, I used to have a podcast, so I used to be the one interviewing, so it's nice to be interviewed, I guess.
Well, that's great. I'm learning from the pro right now. So Derek, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm currently the VP Customer Success at iLobby, where I oversee the post-sale functions. So that's onboarding, support, and success. Been in SaaS and CS specifically for about 7.5 years. And previous to that was in the nonprofit sector.
Oh, great. Actually, before the show, we were just talking about how did you get into CS and why you decided staying with CS. Can you tell me a little bit more?
Sure. I mean, so I've been in the nonprofit sector in an organization called ISEC, where I had an opportunity to work abroad, to do some account management, sales, some leadership roles. And I kind of done a few things, and I was trying to figure out what's next. And I tried a few different roles and got introduced to one of your previous guests, Greg Boyd, at a company called Exonify. I was interested in ed tech. And I was talking about, more of a sales role. And then he's like, well, have you ever thought about CS? And I'm like, I've never heard of it. And he started explaining it to me. And I was excited. So I'm like, wow, because, CS, I think, is such a great way if you're new to tech. Like, you have to work with every part of the business. You have to work with product. You have to work with sales, with marketing, with finance. So for me, I came in 2016. And for me, it was just an opportunity to soak in so much about how tech and software companies work. So I came in as a CSM in 2016 and was able to kind of build off from there. But I was very lucky and fortunate to have had the opportunity to transition in at that point. But I think my background more in account management was kind of the reason I was able to get in. But I never worked in tech before, so that was very new to me at the time.
I see you're also very passionate about another organization. ISEC? Can you share about your early experience?
Sure.
and how you travel around the 40 countries?
Yeah, so I was fortunate when I started at University at McGill. I joined ISEC, which is a youth-led organization. It originally started after World War II with the purpose of fostering cross-cultural understanding through an exchange program, all run by students. So I got involved when I was in university. I went to India when I was 18 for a summer, which was like super life-changing, and then got involved running the McGill Association. And then had every role is 1 year, all run by young people. So I moved to the national staff, managing all the national partners and sponsors, so more of a sales kind of account management role. Moved to be the Canadian president, running the Canadian organization and representing Canadian youth abroad, and then eventually moving to the Netherlands for a year to be part of the global leadership team in Rotterdam. And it was just, it's a very funny organization because you're getting a lot of the soft skills that come into focus later in life, such as leading teams, building strategy, running conferences, public speaking, and having a safe space to fail and to try things. So yeah, it was a big part of who I am. I met my wife through it. She's from Mexico. She was involved in the organization as well. And yeah, like a lot of what I do today still harkens back to those experiences from, again, between when I was 18 and 24, and just had, again, a great opportunity to try things and often fail. But now, again, I look back on those, and it influences a lot of how I approach leading today, and just, yeah, my general work philosophy.
I was thinking about your global experience and
Hmm.
your leadership experience globally. How do you see that impact? Like, if you went from global to now Canadian, how that changed?
So when I was in ISAC, I had the opportunity to, I think, go to 40 countries. Just, yeah, spent a lot of time really understanding folks from different cultures. And I remember, well, Greg came to me when I was at Exonify, and he's like, okay, you've been a CSM here. We need someone to do international. You've done international, so go do this internationally now. I'm like, cool, great, that sounds awesome. And that was a really cool opportunity because I was working with we had a number of direct customers at the time in different countries, and also reseller partners that represented us in other countries as well. And so I was not only managing customers directly from Canada, but through travel, but also working with partners that represented us and enabling them in their, or partnering them in their CS programs and strategies. And I found that the background helped because each market was so culturally different, different mannerisms, different communication approaches, different ways to influence and get things done. I do think it's been a big change because we had some of the markets pre-COVID that weren't as comfortable with video conference and that sort of thing. And that definitely changed with COVID, because it used to be that you had to go on site to really get much done in some of these countries. I found in South Africa and Mexico were two in particular. The UAE is another one where that tended to be the case. But yeah, I think that, and at POCA as well, we had a number of international customers. We did international events. I think one of the bigger things is just the difference in the approach on relationships. So, there's many cultures outside North America. There's a stronger focus on relationship building. And so how do we make time for that, whether that's through events, through meetings, through other engagement points? From a product perspective, you'll get product feedback from some of these different markets that is quite different than what you might get from your North American market. And so how do you take that into account? How do you quantify it at scale? Whether that's, oh, we want the administrative side of a platform translated, which is a pretty heavy lift, or the user side of the platform translated, or maybe there's issues with characters registering properly in certain markets, or like the whole way that cultures operate is quite different. It leads to different flows that are required in a product. So I think one thing I've seen too is how to bring that back. I know at Exonify, we would have customer events in these different markets, and we would always bring someone from product to those meetings so that they could actually speak to the customers firsthand, get some of that understanding and bring it back. So that's also been another nuance.
Well, so you mentioned the work philosophy and how you lead a team. So can you give us a little more example? Like, what's your philosophy?
Yeah, I think there's a number of ways to take that question. I think Isaac, what it taught me was about there's a connection between your work, your team, and the broader world. And so like I kind of take that back to how I work in terms of what's the bigger vision that we're trying to achieve, and then what are our big rocks, and then how does that break down to individual responsibility, targets, all that. So I think the way I structure kind of that pyramid of activity um, is important. I think also like when I mentioned work philosophy, like there was a year in ISIC where I worked like 90 hours a week, like, and I burned out. I'd be in the office till 9 p.m. And I was 21, 22. So I learned that at that age not to do that. So now today, I sometimes come in early, but when I leave at 5, I leave. And I have a 2-year-old. I go home. I'm with my family. I don't work at night. I'm very busy. Like I have a lot to do, but I organize in a way to set that balance. And I try to instill that with my team because sometimes like we're customer facing. There's always so many things to be done. But for us, it's a matter of how do we prioritize? How do we make our hours high output and have high meaning and focus customers on moments that matter, right? Because there's a lot of busy work that you can do. And so for me, I try to instill that philosophy in our team. And also like when you're on vacation, you're off. You don't need to feel guilty to check things. let's be high output, let's be proud of the work we're doing, let's have fun coming to work, but let's also take the time to rest and have a holistic life that's not just work. So there's probably more to it, but that's some of how I think about that.
I love what you say, moments that matter. And just like you mentioned, like just being busy is not really the busyness, as I think one of the lessons I also learned earlier is filling up your calendar with meetings doesn't really mean that you're doing productive work. Yeah. And so let's talk about the moments that matter in customer relationships. How do you define that?
I'll be honest, I don't know if I have a good definition. This was a theme that came out of I went to the Churn Zero ROIG conference in DC back in October, and I like that phrase. And it's been an interesting question for me to ponder, because when I started at Exonify was larger deal sizes generally. So your accounts are a higher value, so you can spend a higher touch amount of time with those customers because they're paying you a sufficient amount of money, so you can structure account portfolios for CSMs in a way that they have, maybe they have 25 accounts, maybe they have 50 accounts, maybe they have 5 accounts. So you can dedicate that. Now, within that, you can still think about what moments that matter, what are high impact moments, whether that's a customer business review, whether that's an engagement with an exec champion, a product collaboration, an on-site review. There's a number of ways that can be approached. I think what I'm living right now is my last 2 rules. I've started to work where, yes, there's a lot of big customers, but there's also a high number of smaller customers if you look at how much they pay. And so how do you kind of combine technology and that one-to-one human engagement in a way that makes sense? Because in today's economic environment, you're not going to have as many CSMs as you might have a few years, like 2 years ago, for the amount of revenue under management. So you have to do more with less. So that in itself forces you to prioritize. So then let's just say you have a certain number of hours per week and you have 500 accounts in a portfolio. So what are those moments that will really matter? And how do you complement that with technology, with automation, with marketing, with other on-demand resources so that a customer still feels supported? I have a family member who has been using a vendor for a few years, and that vendor was acquired. And then they didn't hear anything from this vendor for 2 years until the renewal came up. And, this family member was a bit frustrated about it. But like when you think about it, like they're only spending $5,000 a year on this vendor, right? So for that business, that is not a lot of money, but still you have to figure out how to make that customer feel special and feel valued, right? And feel that they're getting what they need to be successful using the product. So that's what we're trying to figure out. I don't think I have the answer, but it's more of I think the economic environment is pushing us. And if you're in a business where you have a high number of smaller dollar value clients, how do you structure it with limited resources and more of as a holistic experience for that client? So it is a positive experience where they're getting that value promise, but you're also managing the cost side appropriately.
What you said is so timely right now, because this year, I do hate the phrase "do more with less," but I think we can do things smarter and not the hard way. And it's not no more growth at all costs. That's it. You have to be a bit smarter about that.
Well, I even just think like some things we're doing, like we historically we would train every single customer one-to-one. And when I got here, we looked at it and like a lot of the sessions were exactly the same. And there are some customers that need more of a one-to-one training, more complex requirements perhaps. But what we started to do is through a tool called Demio, we started to run training webinars. And we have them for new customers, but also for existing customers. So we have 5 running every single week. Remember, our team runs them. We'll have multiple customers join. They can ask questions. They're recorded. And again, it's just a small example, but we're trying to complement that. We also built training videos that kind of provide a high-level summary of those training sessions, because some people might, like I'm the type, I don't want to wait for a webinar. Just show me a 6-minute video and I'll figure it out myself. So you have people that might be interested in that sort of content. You have some that the webinar is sufficient. And then in some cases, if you think about moments that matter, for maybe those larger dollar clients or high potential, then you do that one-to-one experience as well. So I think it's just being creative. And if we can run one training session and we have 6 customers join, that's 1 hour instead of 6 hours, right? Which can be deployed elsewhere. So again, I think it's just being, for us, it's been, where can we be creative while still delivering a high value customer experience?
Yeah, I agree with that. I love how what you said, let the customer feel valued and also adjust to what their learning style is and provide different platforms for that. This is so timely because Jay Nathan this morning published something. If you haven't read, there's like 2 trends in B2B tech. One is consolidation of the tools, and the second one is how buyer want to have more power of doing this stuff on their own. So instead of us solving tickets and just spending more time on the quote moments that matter, that you're providing the best value on those things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that second point. This is a topic we've been discussing right now, because we historically would do a lot for, well, we still do a lot, but like we would, if a client had a request, we would do it for them instead of enabling them to do it for themselves, right? And there are some requests where it makes sense for us to do it based on the nature of it. Maybe it's an integration or something like that. But there are other things where maybe they want to change a functionality in the system, and it's easier for them to do it themselves. So how do we ensure our product is set up to deliver that self-serve experience, and also maybe some help center documentation, some how-to guides? To me, what's in our backend, but then what is that customer experience? What's easiest for them, right? And in some cases, it'll be working with us to do something for them. In other cases, it'll be, hey, I want to just make this change right now. How do I do it? I don't want to wait for somebody. I just want to do it myself, right? I mean, I can say this, like, we use Catalyst as our CS platform, and I joke, I'm the part-time Catalyst admin in my role. But like, one thing I love about it is that I'm able to just make changes when I want, right? I don't need to, like, you sometimes have other tools where you need a full-time admin to manage them. And I don't want to wait for that. I want to just be able to do things, click things, move things myself. So I do think it's definitely a trend. And I think the market is showing that we need to make things as self-serve as possible. And you can look at it from a cost aspect, but I think the bigger thing is just what is the most optimal customer experience, right? And how do we, if we start with that as our lens, then we can work backwards to deliver that experience in whatever manner is most appropriate.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned about using technology to work a little bit smarter and so on. There's another thing I want to ask is delivering digital customer success at scale and leveraging AI in profession. Can you share a little bit more? What do you see of the AI trend right now, and how do you think it complements CS?
I honestly don't know if I'm the best person to answer this. I think you obviously have the ChatGPT stuff in terms of how people are leveraging it for improved email communication or those sort of things. There's a lot of good content online on that front. I know that there's a lot of good tools that can leverage AI, but part of it depends on how strong your data is, whether it's data in your CS platform, right, that then you can use AI for, or it's the quality of your help center, right? So if you have a really strong help center with really good documentation, you have these chatbots now that can self-serve, kind of provide a good experience to the customer, providing resources based on those questions. But you need to have that all built out. So I think just speaking honestly, we're trying to put in place those things to make sure our data is at a part where we could automate more, and also that the quality of our help center is at a point where we could consider leveraging more AI towards that. But I do think one of the key questions for these trends is the prerequisites. What do you need to have in place in order to fully leverage these tools? That's, I guess, what I would add to that conversation.
Yeah. You mentioned about data integrity a lot. Yes. I think it's like garbage in, garbage out, literally. And you can't make decision when the data is not equipped to make decisions. So what's what in the part of the data, what is the one thing that you ask your team to make sure it's done properly, that you care the most?
Well, maybe I'll take a slightly different turn on
approach?
that.
Yeah.
So I think if I think back on data, when I was at my last company, Polka, we brought in a CS platform pretty early in my tenure. And I had been part of a previous CS platform at Exonify, but was more a user, not the one behind it. And when we brought this platform in Polka, uh, we got up and running pretty quickly, but then we realized a lot of our data structure had to be adjusted. There was a lot of incorrect matching of data points, right, between our product and our Salesforce instance. And I felt we were playing catch up my whole time there, right? And so I think a different tact I took coming here is we knew we needed a platform, but we recognized that we had a pretty complicated data set because we had, not to get into too weeds, but like we have, let's say, finance logos, we have accounts, but also in our model, because we work with manufacturers, we have sites or locations. So it adds a whole other layer of complexity to that. And we had that living in 3 different systems. And so first, I think what we had to do is get a line internally on that data structure. And we actually then brought in a data intern specifically to work on this project because we knew it was a full-time job given the amount of customers we have. And so we delayed bringing in a platform specifically to get to a point where we knew that we would have enough data in place. And I think some of that is just trial and error. I didn't know that until I did it at my last company. And so I think it's still, we're like 8 to 10 months in still, but we had a lot of work to do in order to get to that point. So I think we've been thoughtful about it. And so we've had to now, in our final stages of matching all that data, we've had to get the CSMs involved just to kind of do to check some of it. That I think is the biggest piece. Then as it relates to your question, like kind of how do we ensure data integrity with our team? I'm not going to say what I think is my best practice. I think what I am aware of is I think it's easy for us as CS leaders to create net new data points for our team to track. Like, okay, let's do a sentiment score. Okay, let's do the last CBR you had. Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. But the more stuff we add, the harder it is to then ensure that everyone's updating those fields regularly and that you can rely on the data. So I guess my only point on that is something I have to be aware of because I'm a new ideas, new excitement type of guy is to just make sure we're consistent in what are the data points we want updated and I think being thoughtful not to add too many either because otherwise it gets a bit unwieldy and things aren't maybe updated the way that we would want to rely on that data consistently.
I also made a same mistake in my career as well. I thought QBR would be cool to have something to have a checkpoint, but instead of looking into it, I actually want to go back and see how the customer experience is. And then we already have too many touch points. I already know what's going on. Why do we need another meeting? Can you just tell me how my business
customers
going?
Don't like a meeting for the sake of a meeting.
Yes. Yeah.
I worked once in a company where people were measured on whether they had a monthly meeting with a customer. And so they'd be having these meetings, but they had no purpose. There's no agenda, no deck, but it was from a tracking perspective and it didn't really make sense. Now, I think there's an intention behind that, which is having engagement with customers, being able to grow with customers over time and partner with them and identify new contacts. And so there is a role for that, but there needs to be purpose and intent, I think, behind any of those customer interactions. Otherwise, they'll get frustrated that we're, seemingly wasting time.
I was wondering about driving impact. So Kevin was talking about possible business outcome and how CS can play a role in that. Is that something, what's your take on that?
I think it really depends on the business. My previous 2 businesses, this was really big. Exonify is built on driving business outcomes through learning, right? So as I think Greg would have talked about when he talked about value realization, you combine engagement and adoption, in the Exonify's case, to knowledge growth, to behavior change, to ultimate business impact around a metric. That was how we structured everything. I look at Polka, and in Polka, everything in a manufacturing facility is measured, and Polka is integrated specifically into manufacturing operations. And so often it was a land and expand kind of sales model. So we would have to work to generate a KPI increase in a specific metric that the customer was comfortable attributing, not only to secure renewal, but more, I think in that case, to create ammunition for expansion. In our case now, it's a little bit different because of our nature, it's a little bit more of a compliance play and safety play. So there are some things, and I'd like us to continue on that path to do more in terms of measurement, but it's a little bit less of a, oh, we improve sales by 5%, right? It's a bit trickier when you're more about, okay, well, we're fully compliant, we're secure, we're safe. And with us, it might be a little bit more about time savings or cost savings or that. So there's sometimes a play there. Yeah, I think it just, yeah, are you looking at top line metrics or about cost savings? And is that a one-time measurement that can be done? Sometimes it's like immediate. You change a process, you automate something, and there's a time savings. Like we bought Demio and we started doing training webinars. And because of that, we're saving time on the number of hours it takes to train clients. But moving forward, that's kind of now a standard operation. So I think some tools can come in, you can have that immediate one-time kind of ROI, and other ones you're having to continually prove that out. With Exonify we had to show business improvement every year basically to ensure that I think we were in a good position with that account. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer,
yeah,
but
no, this is good.
You can edit it out.
Yeah. I was learning more about compliance and security and what CS means in those industry. Because right now we're all talking about tech, we're talking about MarTech or sales tech, whatever it is. But it's very different in the security space, and we just have to think of it differently. That's really it.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything further to add on that.
So do you see more business relationships are actually going back to in person?
I'm not the same business now as I was before. I do think that when I look at Exonify, we did a lot of in-person visits. And I think as people became more comfortable with remote meetings, in-person meetings still happen, but maybe not as frequently, and they're more purposeful.
Yeah.
Like there are meetings that don't need to be on site, that could just be a call. But how do you get the attention of someone? I think that's one of the bigger challenges is, if I'm in a meeting, often I could be multitasking because I have a million things to do and I want to be out of here by 5:00, right? So how do you get that person's attention when it is online and they could be multitasking? That's a challenge. But there are a number of meetings that don't need to be on site that could definitely be remote. But I don't think it takes that away, especially if you have clients of a larger dollar size. I think there's the technology and there's the partnership. And the partnership comes from building relationships across multiple levels of the organization, really understanding business priorities, and also just getting context. Like when I was at Exonify, we worked mainly with retailers. And before every on-site visit, we would try to go to a store the day before, talk to the staff, talk to the store manager, see how their experience was using the product, and bring that insight to the on-site. And nothing replaces that because you get a sense of the layout, you get a sense of like, okay, yes, there's a lofty vision of how our product works, but then how are actual people using it from that customer? And we would bring that insight to the meeting the next day, and they would always be very impressed or like, oh, wow, like, so what did they say in the store? Or like, it just lent credibility to what we were saying and doing. And that, without that on-site, and I had the same at Polka actually, because we were working with manufacturers, and I didn't have any background manufacturer, but I'd go on like visits of the shop floor and get a tour and get a sense of kind of the flow of the operations, and that you don't get through a Zoom meeting. So that part too, I think, is really important for those sorts of on-site visits.
It also shows you care. You care about how they're using the product, and you're curious, and also you bring things.
Yeah, because you can get in a pretty tricky situation if you're just pitching features and you don't have a real understanding of that business operation. And again, you can't do it for every customer of every dollar size. It just isn't feasible economically. But for those industries where you're really integrate, like it's different if you're pitching like a Slack or something. Okay, you don't need to go on site to understand how a customer can use Slack too much. But if it's something like in a manufacturing floor setting or in a retail environment, or getting there can be hugely beneficial to get that real understanding of that operation. And then when you come with a recommendation, it has so much more weight to it, because you've shown that you've actually taken the time to understand. You're contextualizing a recommendation with the knowledge of their business. I think that's really key.
How do you translate that knowledge to your team? Do you set up an enablement? Do you ask your team members? How do you do the training on this?
So every company I've been at, we've always had a channel focused on customer stories or customer wins. I find that is a simple, easy way to just help people live and breathe what's happening with customers. That is one thing I've seen. Another one, especially my last company, is when we were allowed to, we would take videos from these on-site tours. Not every company would allow us to, but if we could, we were like, hey, so we were with our customer today. Here's their actual facility. We're going to walk through. We're going to show where our tool is being used. And we would share that video back with the company or show it at a meeting. And at Exonify, I remember Greg would have a customer come in for our company QBR, and there would be a customer interview on stage in front of the company. And you want the whole company to be customer obsessed and to think from a customer perspective. But not everyone's going to be able to do those on-site type activities or be customer facing. So I think it's how do we find ways to enable others to live that experience or to share in some of that context. But the easy win I always find is just you have a channel, you empower your teams to share wins and updates and anecdotes from customers there. And something comes in a minute, we've actually taken that, and then anytime there's a win, we document it in an Excel sheet, and then it's searchable. So if you're a new sales rep and you're trying to understand stories, you actually have a database that then can be searched with all those things that are being added. So it's not a challenging process to add things. You just put it in a channel, but then someone's responsible for them documenting all those customer stories or proof points that then, they can have, whether they're publicly approved or they're anecdotal and you don't say the name, then you have that as a reference point.
I love that, to share the customer story and also searchable for future use.
Yes.
Yeah. From your LinkedIn, I noticed you are a big book reader. What are you reading now?
I've been reading a book called Effortless, which is from Greg McCowan, How to Make It Easier to Do What Matters Most. I'm like halfway through it. I've read a few other books. There's one called Multipliers that Liz Wiseman and him wrote. There's another one he wrote called Essentialism. Essentialism I liked, which is just how to kind of get rid of the noise and focus on your top things. I find I alternate between these kind of personal development books and then more of like the business biographies, historical biographies, just more stories to like wind my brain down. But yeah, those ones I've been reading that recently. Yeah.
Yeah, I also like Daniel Pink, and
I've read one of his, I think.
Yeah, it's just like really understand your behavior and how to work better.
Yeah, there's lots of good ones. My favorite book I always recommend is The First 90 Days. I have every new hire read it just because I feel like it has so many good frameworks that can make or break someone's entry into a new role or new organization. So I often buy it for them or share it with them, just because I think you see sometimes people come in and they can't insert themselves, or they try to move too fast and then they lose credibility, or they don't build the right alliances, or they focus on the wrong things. And I think it's tricky for anyone. How do you enter into a new organization successfully and get those tailwinds where you have some early credibility, you have some early wins? So that's the one I think I recommend the most to others. But again, it's very contextual if you're starting a new company or new role.
Well, we have people who are transitioning into CS, and also people who are trying to step up as being a leader. Yeah. Is there any, from the 90-day book, is there something that you can tell the inspired leaders, the framework they should look at?
I think the book's a little bit more once you are formally moving into a role. But I guess is your question about like how maybe some tips for people that want to step up or transition in? So I think if you're trying to transition into CS from another industry, I would suggest like there's some good courses out there. Winning by Design runs some, Pavilion, Uvaro, and there's other ones online. But like learn the lingo of customer success, learn some of the frameworks, learn the tools, and that can help reduce that gap if you're transitioning from another industry. Maybe you've been in sales, another industry, or account management. I would highly recommend that. Getting involved in CS communities as well, like CS and Focus, obviously. But that part is big. I think for trying to step up as a leader, it's tricky. Like what's the easiest? Is it to do it within a business or is it to go somewhere else? Right? I think it will depend on that. I think finding mentors is good. Like right now, I'm mentoring someone with the Catalyst Coaching Corner, and that's been really fun. Like we had our first mentoring session a few weeks ago, and I'd like to do more of that. So I think, trying to find a mentor yourself can be a good idea if that's like a path you want to go down. I think like talking to the other people that have been in the role or like that are in similar roles. Like, so as an example, this is my first time leading customer success, onboarding, and support. I've never led onboarding before. So before I started, I had a chat with the onboarding manager at Exonify. So I'm like, hey, I just want to get a view into your world. And that was certainly helpful. Support as well. Like I actually went to CS and Focus event last year and they had a support breakout. So I went to there and I'm just asking a bunch of questions, taking notes. I'm like, look, I'm going to be a beginner here, so let me learn what I don't know and what I should be aware of coming in. So I think those are good things. I think, yeah, like some of the courses too. Like I took the Pavilion Chief Customer Officer school last year, and in particular, what I found most beneficial was some of the peer-to-peer connections. So the sessions are fine, but taking the time to have a few calls outside of the class with some of the members of the class, like just learning how CS is done at other companies. Because that's the biggest thing I've realized. I spent 5.5 years at Exonify, which is a long time in tech. And I realized that's one version of CS. There's a lot of different versions of CS in terms of revenue responsibility, in terms of deal size, in terms of do you own onboarding or not? Do you own renewals or not? And so now being at my third tech company, I'm getting a more well-rounded view of how CS can be. So I think talking to other people in different roles in CS, trying to understand some of those mechanics and playbooks can be a helpful way to avoid, like, also, like if you want to, like, let's say you've worked at one company, you want to go to your second as a leader, you can't just apply the playbook from the last company. You have tools in a toolbox, some of which will apply, but it's going to be a completely different set of challenges and opportunities. And some of those tools you have from the past may be helpful, and you might need to develop new tools. So those are a few things that I've seen.
This is great. It's not just copy and paste your last playbook into your new role. It's about keep learning, adapting, asking questions, finding mentors.
I remember when I interviewed here, one of the folks asked me, like, so how long is it going to take to set up CS? And I'm like, I don't know. And anyone that tells you is bullshitting you, because it's just like, it's so contextual and it depends on a whole host of factors. So, you got to get in, like when I came in, like one of the first things we did is we mapped the whole customer journey cross-function. We got everyone in a room and we tried to identify what is the current state of the journey. And we said, what does the customer experience? What do we do internally? And what are the pain points? And from there, then we were able to, okay, we have that on one side. Okay, what is the future state we want? Let's get buy-in. And then what are the steps to get there? And we had to go through that exercise to get clear on, well, are we aligned on the current state, first of all? I think that was important, because we had jumped too quickly to the solutions. We may not have been aligned on what we saw as the things to keep and also some of the areas to evolve. And then getting alignment on that future state, and then short-term, long-term, what are the steps to get there? We have a very different business here than my last two, as any business. And so going through that exercise was helpful. And then some things I'd done before I was able to bring forward, but also that I've had to learn a whole bunch of new things I'd never done before. And I think that's the case for any new role, right? It's not going to be cookie cutter. And I think people that come in promising the answers on day 5 aren't probably going to last very long.
I think you mentioned that a couple of times about really adapting to the business model and don't use a cookie cutter. This is going to be a little contradict, because we're ending our year, 2023, entering next new year. What would you say the one thing you wish, like, we should drop, and one thing we should adapt going into 2024?
In the CS function?
Yes.
Well, I think you touched on it earlier, which is, I think there's already a trend. Like, there's people that will post the CBR is dead or that sort of thing. Like, I think we need to make sure any meetings we have, and like the moments that we're creating with customers, they matter. They have purpose. They're value adding. And like, I look at us, like we're not perfect. And I've been on a number of our customer meetings, and there's a number I've been on that have been excellent, high value adding, super purposeful, customers really pumped coming out of it. And there's some others where we went through it and they were polite, but I'm like, I don't know if we added value in this meeting, right? And I think that's, people are busier. If they're going to take time in their agenda, how do we just ensure that we're prepped, we've aligned expectations, we're bringing value to the table, we're balancing the dialogue, we have clear next steps that are actioned on right away. So I do think that will be one thing heading into next year.
Well, keep adding value. Yeah. Yeah. It's quite interesting as we may heard of this that Google and Yahoo is cracking down on the emails, right? So in the past, there was like, oh, cold call is dead, but it's not really dead. Email's dead, not really dead. QBR is dead, maybe not dead, but if you're adding value, that become a actually valuable meeting. So it's not dead. So just really be careful about the advice out there, and I guess take it with cautions. I guess that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And adjust that. Well, we're coming to the end. Is there any one last thought we want to share with the audience?
I guess for anyone that's looking to enter into CS, I think it was one of the questions you framed to me before. If I have any advice, I think this year's been interesting. I've interviewed more people than I've ever interviewed before. We hired, I think, 10 new people to our team this year. It's been a lot of interviewing, a lot of time spending talking to people about CS. I think the things that I've seen that have differentiated people are those that are highly prepared, have done their homework, that come across as very proactive, that ask good questions and show a genuine interest in the company. I think those are things that I see standing out. So I would just offer that for anyone that maybe be looking to transition into CS or interviewing for a new role. Those are just some things that I think have stood out from the candidates I've seen this year.
Well, thank you so much, Derek. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for having me.
If anyone wants to contact you, what's the best way?
Yeah, LinkedIn is fine. Yeah.
Right. I'll put your LinkedIn in the episode and underneath. Thank you again.
Thank you.
That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Check out our LinkedIn and Slack group at From CS in Focus.